In the chilly winter of 2011, a group of behavioral researchers at Harvard Business School gathered dozens of ordinary people into a room to perform a deceptively simple, mundane task. Each volunteer was handed a flat cardboard box from a local furniture store and told to assemble it piece by piece, following a set of standard, slightly frustrating instructions. Once the task was complete, the scientists quietly placed identical, perfectly assembled boxes built by professionals right next to the ones the volunteers had just painstakingly put together. What happened next during the secret bidding phase shocked the economists, because the participants were willing to pay a massive 63% more money for their own crooked creation. This single psychological anomaly is currently being weaponized by multi-billion-dollar tech companies and global corporations to make you completely blind to the true value of what you buy. Before we unlock the terrifying dark pattern behind how your brain tricks you into loving your own bad investments, let us first examine a hidden trap that nobody ever warned you about. I break down one critical psychological concept per video in plain, actionable English. So if you want to understand how the modern world subtly manipulates your financial decisions, please subscribe. Think about the last time you spent hours setting up a brand new smart home system, or perhaps assembling a stubborn piece of Target furniture in your tiny living room. The final product might have had a few scratches, or maybe a wobbly leg that required a folded piece of cardboard underneath, but to your eyes, it looked completely flawless. Behavioral economists officially call this cognitive distortion the IKEA Effect, a mental glitch proving that the physical labor we inject into an object directly forces our brain to overvalue it. The legendary trio of scientists, Michael Norton, Daniel Mochon, and Dan Ariely, proved that we do not just buy things because we like them, but we actually love things because we built them. This is the exact moment the brain makes its first massive financial mistake, because it completely confuses the objective market value of an item with our own subjective emotional exhaustion. But before we get to the most counterintuitive part of this experiment, and trust me, this one will deeply surprise you, we must first understand why your evolutionary biology is working against you. Take a moment to genuinely look around your bedroom right now and identify at least one object or old digital project that you refuse to throw away simply because you made it. Our ancient ancestors had to expend massive amounts of physical energy to build shelters and craft hunting tools, which meant that high self-valuation was a survival mechanism for the tribe. In the modern capitalist landscape, however, this survival mechanism has been completely inverted, turning your natural pride into a golden highway for corporations to extract cash from your wallet. Global food empires like HelloFresh have built entire empires worth hundreds of millions of dollars by deliberately selling you raw ingredients that require you to do all the hard cooking. You are paying a premium price for the privilege of chopping your own onions and washing your own dishes. Yet your brain perceives the meal as infinitely more luxurious and healthy. The sinister brilliance of this business model is that the company successfully offloads their expensive labor costs directly onto the consumer, while simultaneously making the consumer feel incredibly proud. Build-A-Bear Workshop pioneered this exact strategy decades ago by realizing that children do not want a perfect stuffed animal from a shelf, but rather an imperfect one they stuffed themselves. When a customer inserts a tiny cloth heart into a mass-produced teddy bear, they are unknowingly signing a psychological contract that makes that specific toy completely priceless to their family. This explains why parents will happily pay 3 times the actual market value for a plush toy, completely unaware that they are trapped inside a perfectly engineered behavioral loop. Now watch what happens when we transition away from physical objects and move straight into the invisible digital world where you spend the vast majority of your waking life. Silicon Valley tech giants have quietly integrated the IKEA effect into almost every software onboarding process, forcing you to customize your profile before you even use the actual application. By making you choose your preferred topics, upload a custom avatar, and arrange your digital dashboard, they are forcing you to invest your precious labor into their virtual platform. Once you have spent 2 hours perfecting your personal settings, the psychological cost of abandoning that app and switching to a competitor becomes completely unbearable for your subconscious mind. You will continue to pay for a mediocre subscription service year after year simply because your brain cannot bear the thought of throwing away the digital house you built. Stay with me for the next 2 minutes, because what I am about to show you next is the dark twist that separates smart investors from people who lose everything. What if I told you that the exact same mental glitch keeping your room cluttered is the #1 reason why people stay trapped in dead-end careers for decades? When you spend 5 years pouring your sweat, tears, and late nights into a corporate project or a struggling startup, you develop an extreme, irrational attachment to its ultimate success. Even when the market screamingly signals that the project is completely dead and useless, you will continue to burn cash and time trying to save it from inevitable collapse. This is the exact intersection where the IKEA effect collides violently with the sunk cost fallacy, creating a psychological prison that prevents you from ever walking away from failure. Think of the amateur cryptocurrency investor who spends dozens of hours researching an obscure digital coin, creating complex spreadsheets, and arguing with strangers on internet forums about its potential. When the coin inevitably plummets towards zero, they refuse to sell because their brain overvalues the asset based purely on the intense mental labor they spent researching it. They will proudly sink with the ship, convinced that they possess a superior, hidden knowledge, while institutional investors who have zero emotional attachment simply cut their losses and walk away. But the Harvard researchers discovered an even darker caveat to this rule during their secondary experiments, and it is a detail that almost nobody ever talks about on YouTube. The inflation of value only occurs if you actually manage to successfully finish building the object, meaning that the psychological magic completely evaporates if the task is left incomplete. If a volunteer was interrupted midway through building their box, or if the instructions were so incredibly difficult that they failed to finish it, they valued it at zero. This proves that the IKEA effect is not triggered by the labor itself, but rather by the intense shot of dopamine our brain receives upon completing a self-directed task. Modern product designers use this hidden insight to create the illusion of difficulty, making tasks just challenging enough to feel rewarding, but never hard enough to cause actual failure. They want you to struggle just a little bit so that you fall deeply in love with the final outcome, completely blindfolded to the fact that the entire experience was orchestrated. And here is the most empowering thing about this entire psychological phenomenon. Once you finally see the invisible strings of this trap, you can actively choose to step out of it. To survive the modern financial landscape, you must train your mind to separate the joy of creation from the cold, hard, objective market reality of the product itself. When evaluating a business venture, a stock investment, or even a piece of home decor, you must ask yourself an incredibly brutal and uncomfortable question to clear your vision. If an absolute stranger walked up to me right now and offered me this exact same item pre-built, would I actually pay this amount of money out of my own pocket? If the honest answer to that question is no, then you are currently a victim of the IKEA effect, and you are actively protecting an illusion that is quietly draining your wealth. Let us pull all of these pieces together so that you can carry this psychological shield with you out into the real world and protect your hard-earned money. First, remember that your brain possesses a deeply rooted, ancient biological bias that automatically inflates the value of anything you expend physical or mental energy to create. Second, understand that multi-billion-dollar corporations across food, tech, and retail are actively using this bias to offload their labor costs directly onto your shoulders while charging a premium. Third, recognize that this cognitive distortion applies heavily to your investments, your career choices, and your digital life, frequently forcing you to cling to failing projects far longer than logic dictates. Finally, the only way to break the spell of the IKEA effect is to ruthlessly run the stranger test, forcing yourself to evaluate your creations through a completely detached, objective lens. People who master this single psychological distinction tend to make vastly superior financial decisions, saving themselves thousands of dollars and years of wasted emotional energy on things that do not matter. If you found this breakdown valuable, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so that you never miss our upcoming deep dives into human behavior. Share this video with exactly one person you know who desperately needs to hear this truth today, because one deep conversation about this concept could completely change how they look at money. Thank you so much for watching this video until the very end, and I will see you in the next piece as we continue to unlock the hidden secrets of the human mind.